The planet Ursus hung serenely in the inky void of space, its lush green landmasses and swirling blue oceans a stark contrast to the empty blackness that surrounded it. For countless millennia, the Ursini had called this world home, living in harmony with its verdant landscapes and abundant natural resources. In the rolling hills and sweeping plains, small villages dotted the terrain, their simple structures blending seamlessly into the environment. The Ursini led lives of quiet purpose, tending to their farmlands, caring for their families, and cherishing the tranquility of their isolated existence. They were a people content with their modest lot, their needs few and their desires simple. Yet, unbeknownst to the Ursini, their humble planet had become a target of great interest to the expansionist forces of the Universal Alliance. The Alliance, a vast confederation of advanced alien civilizations, had long sought to extend its dominion across the galaxy, subjugating lesser worlds and extracting their resources to fuel its relentless growth. And Ursus, with its bountiful supply of a rare and invaluable mineral, had caught the eye of the Alliance's avaricious leaders. They saw the planet's untapped potential, its people ripe for exploitation, and they began to make plans to bring this remote world under their control. While the Ursini remained blissfully unaware of the looming threat, subtle changes began to occur across their peaceful planet. Subtle shifts in the magnetosphere, imperceptible tremors in the tectonic plates, and strange disturbances in the atmosphere all hinted at the impending upheaval that was to come. But the Ursini, their lives guided by the rhythms of nature, paid little heed to these nascent signs of impending calamity. In the outlying regions of the planet, however, a few perceptive individuals began to sense that something was amiss. Seasoned hunters and weathered farmers, their connection to the land was deeply attuned, and they detected the faint whispers of Ursus itself, as if the planet were trying to warn them of the approaching danger. These few Ursini, their curiosity piqued, began to investigate the strange occurrences, scouring ancient texts and consulting with the elders of their communities. What they uncovered sent chills down their spines. Tales of a great and terrible power that had once sought to subjugate Ursus, only to be repelled by the planet's own innate defenses. Could it be that Ursus, for all its seeming tranquility, harbored a hidden strength, a primal power that lay dormant, awaiting the right moment to be unleashed? The prospect both intrigued and terrified the Ursini, for they knew that if their suspicions were correct, their peaceful way of life was about to be upended in the most catastrophic of ways. As these troubling thoughts consumed them, the Ursini watchmen continued their vigil, their eyes trained skyward, waiting with bated breath for the first signs of the coming tempest. For they sensed, with a growing unease, that the Universal Alliance's arrival was imminent, and that their humble world was about to be thrust into a conflict that would test the very limits of their resilience and resourcefulness. The first inklings of the Universal Alliance's approach came in the form of distant tremors that shook the foundations of the Ursini settlements. Perplexed, the villagers emerged from their homes to gaze upward, squinting against the glare of the twin suns as strange shapes began to coalesce in the upper atmosphere. Alarm rippled through the populace as the alien vessels descended, their sleek, angular forms a stark contrast to the organic architecture of the Ursini constructs. Panic set in as the ships disgorged legions of heavily armed soldiers, their uniforms and equipment unfamiliar to the bewildered onlookers. Before the Ursini could even begin to mount a defense, the Alliance forces had established a perimeter around the villages, sealing off all means of escape. Ursini elders, their faces etched with fear and confusion, were summarily rounded up and detained, while the rest of the population was herded into makeshift holding pens. The invaders wasted no time in securing control over the planet's vital infrastructure. Military-grade sensors and communication relays were swiftly deployed, cutting off the Ursini's ability to coordinate or call for help. Swarms of robotic drones scoured the surface, mapping resources and identifying strategic locations. As the Ursini watched helplessly, their conquerors began to systematically dismantle their way of life. Farmlands were razed, forests were clear-cut, and entire villages were leveled to make way for industrial mining operations and sprawling military complexes. The once verdant landscapes were rapidly transformed into a patchwork of scars and blighted earth. Worst of all were the Ursini, who were forced into servitude, compelled to toil endlessly in the extraction of the precious mineral that had drawn the Alliance to their world. Families were torn apart, their members scattered across labor camps and processing facilities, their spirits broken by the relentless demands of their captors. Yet, amidst the gloom and despair, a flicker of resistance began to stir. In the darkest corners of the occupied territories, whispers of rebellion spread like wildfire, kindled by the outrage and determination of those who refused to submit to the Alliance's tyranny. Led by a small cadre of brave and resourceful Ursini, these pockets of resistance began to organize, pooling their meager resources and hatching daring plans to disrupt the invaders' operations. They sabotaged equipment, ambushed patrols, and smuggled supplies to their imprisoned brethren, all the while evading the Alliance's tightening grip. The invaders, for their part, responded with ruthless efficiency, employing increasingly brutal tactics to quell the growing unrest. Mass arrests, public executions, and the deployment of advanced surveillance technologies became commonplace as the Alliance sought to stamp out any signs of dissent. But the Ursini, their backs now against the wall, refused to be cowed. Their determination only hardened in the face of such oppression, and they began to uncover hidden reserves of strength and resilience that surprised even themselves. In the remote corners of Ursus, where the Alliance's control was least secure, the Ursini rebels launched bolder and more coordinated attacks, disrupting supply lines, liberating work camps, and even striking at the heart of the occupying forces. Their exploits, though small in scale, began to inspire hope among their fellow citizens, who saw in these acts of defiance a glimmer of a future free from the Alliance's yoke. As the conflict escalated, the invaders found themselves increasingly on the defensive, their vaunted military prowess seemingly outmatched by the Ursini's cunning and resourcefulness. The simple, agrarian people were proving to be a far more formidable foe than the Alliance had anticipated, and their planet's secrets were beginning to reveal themselves in ways that threatened to upset the balance of power. High Commissioner Vexner's mandibles twitched with irritation as his shuttle approached Earth's orbital platform. The humans had ignored 3 demands for explanation since their theatrical exit from the Grand Assembly. Now he would remind them of their place in the galactic order. Life signs scanned complete, his aide reported. Station showing minimal biological signatures. No human crew detected. Vexner's compound eyes narrowed. Impossible. This station handles 30% of Earth's orbital traffic. Run the scan again. The results came back the same. The massive structure hung silent against Earth's blue curve, its docking bays empty. Emergency lighting cast weak pulses through viewport windows. Surface scan of the planet, he ordered. The results made his carapace bristle. Major cities showed barely any power usage. Industrial centers were cold. It was as if humanity had simply vanished. They're hiding something. Vexner's translation unit struggled to convey his frustrated clicks. Dock us. I want a full inspection team aboard that station in 10 minutes. The Federation shuttle extended its docking arms. None of their sensors detected the small objects scattered throughout the debris field around the station. Objects that looked like fragments of human satellites, their surfaces dulled by solar radiation. Inside the station, Vexner led his inspection team through eerily quiet corridors. Emergency lights cast strange shadows. Their boots clicked on metal floors designed for human gravity. Signs of orderly evacuation, his security chief reported. No evidence of struggle or panic. They just left. No species simply abandons their orbital infrastructure. Vexner accessed a computer terminal. Dead. He tried another. The same. Check the main control center. I want access to their surveillance logs. They found the control center empty, screens dark. Dust had settled on abandoned coffee cups and personal items. A primitive paper calendar showed a date 3 weeks ago circled in red. Sir, His aide's translator squealed with alarm, detecting power surge from multiple points around the station. Vexnor spun toward the viewport just as the first quantum-enhanced EMP devices activated. The pulse was invisible, but its effects were catastrophic. Every Federation system within 1,000 kilometers went dark simultaneously. Their shuttle shields failed. Navigation died. Communication arrays burned out. Across Earth orbit, the Federation's entire monitoring network collapsed into silent, useless metal. Backup systems. Vexnor clicked frantically. Get me any working communication device. Everything's dead, sir, his security chief reported. Even our personal translators are failing. Wait, what's that sound? A mechanical clicking echoed through the station's corridors. Old-fashioned speakers, powered by simple electrical current, crackled to life. A human voice filled the station. Admiral Sarah Chen's voice. Greetings, High Commissioner. By now you've discovered that your technology isn't functioning. Don't worry. We've left you enough life support for a comfortable wait. Rescue ships should reach you in approximately 6 hours. Vexnor's mandibles clacked in fury. They planned this. The evacuation, the power signatures, everything. You believed we were hiding. Chen's recording continued. The truth is, we were preparing. For centuries, you restricted our technology, believing it would keep us dependent. Instead, you forced us to master principles your species has forgotten. Today, we demonstrate one simple application. Through the viewport, Vexnor watched in horror as more pulses swept Earth orbit clean of Federation surveillance. Their entire solar system monitoring network, the product of centuries of technological supremacy, was being systematically obliterated by primitive human weapons. Consider this a reminder. Chen's voice concluded. Humanity remembers the Magellan. We remember every restriction, every embargo, every condescending dismissal of our potential. And now, High Commissioner, we begin to show you exactly what primitive humans can do. The speakers went silent, leaving Vexnor and his team stranded in the empty station. Through the viewport, Earth turned slowly below them, its surface deceptively peaceful. But in hidden bunkers and underground facilities across that blue world, humanity was emerging from their chrysalis. The Federation's greatest nightmare was beginning. A species they had failed to keep contained was about to demonstrate just how much they had learned during their centuries of enforced primitiveness. And they were starting with a bang. As the Universal Alliance's occupation of Ursus ground on, the Ursini found themselves increasingly drawn into a conflict that tested the very limits of their abilities. The once tranquil populace, forced to endure the indignities and brutalities of their captors, began to uncover hidden reserves of strength and resilience that surprised even themselves. In the outlying regions, where the Alliance's control was most tenuous, the Ursini rebels had been steadily gathering support and honing their tactics. Their daring raids and acts of sabotage, though small in scale, had sown seeds of doubt and demoralization among the invading forces. The Ursini's intimate knowledge of their home planet's terrain and resources proved invaluable, allowing them to stay one step ahead of their pursuers and strike with devastating effect. But the true transformation of the Ursini people was not just a matter of their collective will to resist. As the conflict wore on, strange and inexplicable phenomena began to manifest across the planet, hinting at a deeper, more primal power that lay dormant within Ursus itself. Strange disturbances in the magnetic fields, unexplained seismic activity, and sudden shifts in weather patterns caught the attention of the Ursini rebels, who began to suspect that their world was somehow aiding in their struggle against the Alliance. Tales of ancient legends, long dismissed as myth, resurfaced, speaking of a sentient, living planet that would rise to defend its people in their hour of greatest need. Emboldened by these whispers of their world's hidden power, the Ursini rebels began to experiment, testing the boundaries of their own abilities and the responsiveness of their environment. They discovered that their connection to the land and its rhythms ran deeper than they had ever imagined, allowing them to anticipate the movements of their enemies. sense impending dangers, and even influence the very elements of their surroundings. In one daring operation, a team of Ursini saboteurs used their newfound abilities to divert the course of a raging river, flooding a strategic Alliance outpost and stranding its occupants. In another instance, a group of rebels summoned a powerful windstorm to disrupt the operations of an enemy mining facility, scattering the invaders and collapsing their infrastructure. The Alliance commanders, bewildered by these seemingly supernatural occurrences, scrambled to understand the nature of this threat. Their advanced technology and overwhelming firepower proved ineffective against the Ursini's enigmatic powers, and they found themselves increasingly on the defensive, forced to adapt their tactics to this new baffling challenge. As the Ursini's exploits spread, a sense of renewed hope and determination swept through the occupied populace. They had witnessed the incredible feats of their fellow citizens, and the realization that their planet itself was an ally in their struggle against the invaders filled them with a newfound courage. In the villages and work camps, the Ursini began to subtly resist in ways both overt and covert. They slowed the pace of their labor, sabotaged machinery, and shared information about the rebels' activities, all the while maintaining an outward facade of compliance. The Alliance's grip on the planet began to loosen as their control over the population eroded. The rebels, sensing this shift in the tide, redoubled their efforts, launching increasingly bold and coordinated attacks against the occupying forces. They ambushed supply convoys, liberated work camps, and even infiltrated the Alliance's command centers, sowing chaos and confusion within the ranks of their adversaries. As the conflict escalated, the Ursini's connection to their world deepened, and they began to unlock even greater powers that defied the understanding of their alien oppressors. The very elements of Ursus, its winds, its waters, its earth, seemed to respond to the will of the Ursini, becoming extensions of their own formidable abilities. In the face of this mounting resistance, the Universal Alliance found itself in an increasingly precarious position. Their vaunted military might was proving ineffective against the Ursini's unorthodox tactics and their planet's mysterious defenses. The invasion that had once seemed like an easy conquest was now threatening to become a quagmire, one that challenged the very foundations of the Alliance's expansionist ambitions. As the conflict on Ursus raged on, the balance of power began to shift in an unexpected direction. The Ursini, once a seemingly docile and passive people, had undergone a remarkable transformation, tapping into newfound reserves of strength and resilience that confounded their Universal Alliance overlords. Emboldened by their growing mastery over the planet's primal energies, the Ursini rebels launched a series of increasingly daring and coordinated attacks against the occupation forces. Their intimate knowledge of Ursus terrain and their ability to harness the very elements of their world gave them a decisive advantage, allowing them to strike with devastating precision and elude the Alliance's superior firepower. In one bold operation, a team of Ursini saboteurs used their psychokinetic abilities to trigger a massive landslide, burying an entire Alliance supply convoy under tons of rock and debris. In another instance, a group of rebels summoned a violent electrical storm, frying the circuitry of enemy battle drones and disrupting communications across a wide area. The Alliance commanders, bewildered and increasingly frustrated by these unexpected developments, struggled to adapt their tactics to this new threat. Their advanced technology and formidable military might, which had previously assured them victory, now seemed woefully inadequate against the Ursini's unorthodox and unpredictable methods of resistance. Worse still, the Ursini's exploits began to inspire hope and galvanize the broader population, who had previously resigned themselves to the yoke of their alien overlords. Whispers of the rebels' daring feats spread through the work camps and villages, kindling a growing spirit of defiance and a determination to cast off the shackles of the Alliance's oppression. As the occupied Ursini began to openly defy their captors, the Alliance's grip on the planet started to loosen. Supply lines were disrupted, communication networks were compromised, and the invaders found themselves increasingly isolated and vulnerable. The once docile population was now actively resisting, sabotaging equipment, aiding the rebels, and exploiting every crack in the Alliance's armor. Desperate to regain control, the Alliance dispatched elite shock troops and cutting-edge combat platforms to crush the Ursini's burgeoning insurgency. But even these formidable reinforcements proved no match for the defenders of Ursus, who had now fully awakened to the planet's own primal power. In a particularly decisive engagement, a squad of Ursini rebels, drawing upon the very earth beneath their feet, summoned a series of powerful tremors that shook the foundation of an Alliance military base, causing the structures to collapse and trapping the invaders under the rubble. The survivors, disoriented and demoralized, were then ambushed by a horde of furious Ursini, who overwhelmed them with a relentless barrage of attacks. As news of this stunning victory spread, the morale of the occupation forces plummeted. The once confident Alliance soldiers found themselves increasingly unnerved by the Ursini's uncanny abilities, their unease only compounded by the growing realization that their technological superiority was no longer a guaranteed advantage. The Ursini, sensing their adversaries' growing vulnerability, redoubled their efforts, launching coordinated strikes across multiple fronts. They disrupted supply chains, sabotaged key infrastructure, and even managed to liberate several work camps, freeing their imprisoned brethren and bolstering the ranks of the resistance. The Alliance, once so certain of its ability to subdue the Ursini, now found itself in a precarious position. Its forces were stretched thin, its resources depleted, and its hold on the planet slipping through its fingers. The invaders, who had come to Ursus expecting an easy conquest, now faced the very real prospect of a humiliating defeat at the hands of the planet's defiant inhabitants. As the conflict reached a fever pitch, the Ursini rebels, buoyed by their growing confidence in the power of their world, began to envision a future free from the Alliance's tyrannical grip. They knew that the road ahead would be arduous, but the taste of victory had awakened in them a determination to reclaim their home and their freedom, no matter the cost. The Universal Alliance, faced with the growing threat of the Ursini resistance, could no longer afford to ignore the situation on the ground. Their once secure hold on the planet was slipping, and the prospect of a humiliating defeat at the hands of these seemingly primitive inhabitants was unacceptable. Determined to crush the uprising once and for all, the Alliance's high command dispatched its most elite and ruthless units to Ursus, along with a formidable arsenal of cutting-edge weaponry and military technology. These seasoned veterans, hardened by decades of conquest and subjugation, were briefed on the mysterious powers that the Ursini had harnessed and given strict orders to neutralize this threat by any means necessary. As the reinforcements arrived, the Ursini rebels braced themselves for the onslaught, knowing that they would be facing an adversary far more formidable than the occupying forces they had managed to hold at bay thus far. Yet they also recognized that the fate of their planet and their people hung in the balance, and they were resolved to defend their newfound freedom with every ounce of their being. The initial clash was brutal and unforgiving, with the Alliance's superior firepower and tactical expertise pushing the Ursini rebels to the brink of collapse. Wave after wave of elite shock troops, supported by towering bipedal combat mechs and airborne assault platforms, descended upon the rebels' strongholds, raining down a relentless barrage of destruction. But the Ursini, drawing upon their intimate knowledge of the planet's terrain and their ability to manipulate its primal energies, refused to be cowed. They employed a series of daring guerrilla tactics, ambushing the invaders, disrupting their supply lines, and utilizing the very elements of Ursus as weapons against their foes. In one particularly harrowing engagement, a squad of Ursini rebels unleashed a massive dust storm, blinding the Alliance's advanced targeting systems and leaving their heavily armored vehicles floundering in the choking haze. As the invaders struggled to regain their bearings, the Ursini struck with devastating precision, utilizing a combination of projectile weapons and telekinetic attacks to overwhelm and disable their adversaries. Stunned by the rebels' resilience and resourcefulness, the Alliance commanders were forced to reevaluate their tactics. They began to deploy countermeasures designed to disrupt the Ursini's mysterious abilities, experimenting with electromagnetic pulse weapons and specialized neural disruption technology. Yet even these advanced countermeasures proved only partially effective. As the defenders of Ursus continued to adapt and evolve their own methods of resistance, the battle for the planet raged on, with neither side willing to concede ground. The Ursini, fueled by their determination to protect their home and their newfound freedom, fought with a ferocity that belied their humble origins. Meanwhile, the Alliance, its pride and ambitions now at stake, committed ever greater resources and manpower to the conflict, unwilling to accept defeat at the hands of these seemingly primitive inhabitants. As the fighting intensified, the very fabric of Ursus itself began to shift and tremble, as if the planet itself were responding to the titanic clash unfolding upon its surface. Earthquakes, storms, and other natural phenomena disrupted the Alliance's military operations, causing supply lines to be severed, vehicles to be disabled, and entire staging areas to be rendered unusable. The Ursini rebels, recognizing the profound connection between their world and their own struggle, began to harness these primal forces with ever greater skill and precision. They coordinated their attacks with the planet's upheavals, timing their strikes to maximize the chaos and confusion among the invading forces. Increasingly baffled and unnerved by the Ursini's unorthodox tactics and the planet's seemingly sentient resistance, the Alliance commanders found themselves at a loss. Their vaunted military might and advanced technology were proving no match for the defenders of Ursus, who seemed to draw strength and inspiration from the very land they fought to protect. As the conflict dragged on, with no clear end in sight, the Alliance's confidence began to waver. The prospect of a protracted and costly campaign on this remote world, one that could potentially undermine their broader expansionist ambitions, grew increasingly unappealing. The once certain conquerors now faced the very real possibility of a humiliating defeat, a scenario that none of them could have ever imagined. As the titanic struggle for control of Ursus raged on, the planet itself seemed to awaken, as if responding to the desperate cries of its defenders. The very elements of the world, once passive and docile, began to stir with a newfound energy and volatility, turning against the invading forces of the Universal Alliance. Across the scared and battered landscape, strange phenomena began to manifest, defying the understanding of both the Ursini rebels and their alien adversaries. Powerful earthquakes rocked the ground, opening vast chasms that swallowed whole contingents of Alliance troops and vehicles. Ferocious storms, born of seemingly nowhere, battered the invaders' camps and supply lines, wreaking havoc on their operations. Most baffling of all were the sudden and inexplicable shifts in the planet's magnetic fields, which played havoc with the Alliance's advanced sensor and navigation systems. Their precision-guided munitions veered off course, their communications were disrupted, and their command and control networks were rendered all but useless. As the Ursini rebels witnessed these extraordinary phenomena, they came to the realization that Ursus itself was an active participant in the struggle for its freedom. The ancient legends they had once dismissed as mere fables now seemed to hold a kernel of truth, that the planet possessed a primal, sentient power that would rise to defend its people in their hour of greatest need. Emboldened by this revelation, the Ursini rebels redoubled their efforts, harnessing the planet's volatile energies to devastating effect. They summoned towering geysers of superheated steam to scald the invaders, conjured walls of solid earth to block their advance, and even channeled the very lightning from the sky to strike down their foes. The Alliance commanders, their confidence now shaken, struggled to adapt to these unprecedented challenges. Their technological superiority, once their greatest asset, had been rendered largely ineffective against the unpredictable and seemingly supernatural forces they now faced. Panic and disarray began to spread through their ranks as they grappled with the realization that their invasion had awakened something far more powerful than they had ever imagined. In a desperate bid to regain the upper hand, the Alliance deployed their most advanced and experimental weaponry, including powerful energy beams, cryogenic freezing devices, and even experimental antimatter warheads. Yet, time and again, these fearsome armaments proved powerless against the might of the planet itself, which seemed to anticipate and thwart each new attempt to subdue it. As the conflict escalated, the Ursini rebels, guided by their deepening connection to Ursus, grew ever more adept at harnessing the planet's primal energies. They learned to manipulate the very tectonic plates beneath their feet, triggering devastating tremors that collapsed Alliance strongholds and infrastructure. They summoned raging firestorms that consumed the invaders' supply lines, and conjured dense fog banks that cloaked their movements from the enemy's advanced sensors. The Alliance's forces, once so confident and relentless, now found themselves in a desperate struggle for survival. Their superior technology and training seemed to matter little against the overwhelming power of the planet and the unwavering determination of its defenders. Morale plummeted as they witnessed their comrades consumed by the very earth and elements they had sought to conquer. As the battle raged on, the Ursini rebels watched with a mixture of awe and triumph as Ursus itself rose to their defense. The planet, once a passive bystander in the affairs of its inhabitants, had now become an active participant in the struggle, its very essence intertwining with the cause of the resistance. The Ursini, once a humble and unassuming people, had forged an unbreakable bond with their world, drawing strength and inspiration from its primal power. In the face of this formidable alliance between the Ursini and their planet, the Universal Alliance's invasion force found itself increasingly outmatched and demoralized. The prospect of a humiliating defeat at the hands of these seemingly primitive inhabitants now loomed large, challenging the very foundations of the Alliance's expansionist ambitions. As the battle for Ursus raged on, the Universal Alliance's grip on the planet continued to slip, their vaunted military might and advanced technology proving no match for the combined power of the Ursini rebels and the planet itself. Faced with mounting casualties, dwindling resources, and the relentless onslaught of Ursus' primal forces, the invaders were forced to confront a grim reality. Their conquest of this remote world was on the verge of complete and utter failure. The Alliance commanders, once so certain of their inevitable victory, now found themselves in a desperate struggle for survival. Their once formidable warships and combat platforms were being systematically disabled, their supply lines disrupted, and their communications networks compromised by the Ursini's mastery of the planet's elemental energies. The very ground they stood on seemed to turn against them, with earthquakes, landslides, and other natural phenomena wreaking havoc on their operations. Morale among the Alliance's troops plummeted as they witnessed the inexplicable power of Ursus and the unwavering determination of its defenders. They had come to this world expecting an easy subjugation, only to be confronted with a foe that defied their comprehension and mocked their technological superiority. The prospect of defeat, once unthinkable, now loomed large, challenging the very foundations of the Alliance's expansionist ambitions. Desperate to salvage something from the disaster unfolding on Ursus, the Alliance's high command ordered a full-scale withdrawal of their forces. Faced with the choice of committing ever greater resources to a protracted and costly campaign or cutting their losses, they reluctantly conceded that the prize of this remote world was simply not worth the price they would have to pay to secure it. As the order to retreat was given, the Alliance's troops scrambled to evacuate, their once proud formations reduced to a disorganized rabble as they desperately sought to escape the wrath of Ursus and its defiant inhabitants. Entire regiments were scattered, their members either killed or captured by the relentless Ursini rebels, who pursued the invaders with a vengeance born of years of oppression and suffering. The sight of the Alliance's mighty warships fleeing the planet, their hulls scared and their crews demoralized, was a triumphant one for the Ursini. After enduring the indignities and brutalities of the occupation, they had risen up and reclaimed their rightful place as the masters of their own destiny. The planet they had fought so fiercely to defend had become an active participant in their struggle, its primal power turning the tide of the conflict in their favor. As the last of the Alliance's ships disappeared over the horizon, The Ursini rebels gathered in the ruins of their once peaceful villages, their faces etched with a mixture of relief, pride, and a determination to rebuild. They had proven to themselves, and to the galaxy at large, that they were no mere pawns to be exploited, but a resilient and resourceful people capable of standing up to the might of the Universal Alliance. In the days and weeks that followed, the Ursini set about the monumental task of restoring their world to its former glory. They worked tirelessly to repair the damage inflicted by the invaders, drawing upon their newfound connection to the planet's primal energies to accelerate the process. Where once there had been scared and blighted landscapes, lush greenery, and thriving ecosystems began to reemerge, as if Ursus itself was healing from the wounds of the conflict. As the Ursini celebrated their hard-won victory, the news of their triumph spread rapidly through the corridors of power in the Universal Alliance. The stunned and humbled leaders of the vast Interstellar Confederation were forced to confront the reality that their expansionist dreams had been checked by the extraordinary actions of a seemingly primitive people whose bond with their world had proven to be the deciding factor in the struggle. For the Ursini, the future now held a renewed sense of hope and promise. They had proven their mettle, not only as fierce and resourceful warriors, but as caretakers of a world that had chosen to stand beside them in their darkest hour. And as they looked to the stars, they knew that the power of their planet and the unbreakable spirit of its people would always be there to guard against any who sought to subjugate or exploit them ever again.